Coming up on Hands on Mac, let's take a look at a new feature in iOS 17.3. It's stolen device protection. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This show is brought to you by members like you. Thanks. Welcome back to Hands on Mac. I am Mikah Sargent, and today we are taking a look at a new feature for iOS 17.3. This is a feature that Apple introduced due to some interesting reporting from the Wall Street Journal in particular, Joanna Stern from the Wall Street Journal, about ways that thieves were taking people's devices, but more importantly, taking people's passcodes, gaining access to their devices, and gaining access to even more information than they would otherwise have. Joanna Stern has a great interview with one of the thieves who performed this scam, this bit of bad behavior regularly. And it's a really fascinating conversation, well worth checking out. So we'll be sure to link that in the show notes. But now that iOS 17.3 is here, Apple has introduced this feature, so I thought it'd be a great time to talk about stolen device protection. We'll round things out by talking about how to enable it, but before we get into how to turn it on, I want to explain what it is, what it does, so that you can understand why you might want to turn it on. It is a feature that I do have turned on. So let's take a look. All right, with stolen device protection, the most important thing to understand is that it is indeed a feature of iOS 17.3. You will need to make sure that you update to 17.3 if you want to take advantage of this new feature. Secondarily, you should understand that it works when you are away from familiar locations. So, Apple says that familiar locations are going to be places like home and the office. That means that over time, we've talked about this in the past, your phone gets to know your most frequently visited locations if you have location services turned on. And through the use of an algorithm, it determines what becomes a significant or familiar location to you. There's a lot of information that goes into that, including just where you happen to go the most, but also what data you have plugged in different applications. So in your contacts, your specific contact card, what you have in Maps, what you have in the Home app, all of that plays into what is listed as your home and your work location in the Home app. And there may be some other locations. Maybe you regularly visit your mom's house or some other place that may become a familiar location to you. All of that information is used to determine what counts as a familiar location. But when you turn on stolen device protection, it's important to understand that stolen device protection does not work while you're in a familiar location. This is for convenience. So you're getting more security while also maintaining a certain level of convenience. So let's talk about what it means to turn on stolen device protection. So the first feature of stolen device protection is Face ID or Touch ID biometric authentication. So in order to understand why this is important, we need to look at the ways that thieves were gaining access to people's devices and their lives. And essentially what would happen is a bad actor would sit over the shoulder or use some other means of watching someone unlock their device, or as I said, if it wasn't over the shoulder, using some other kind of social engineering attack to be able to learn what the passcode was for the phone. If the person learned what the passcode was for the phone, then they had access to a lot of information on that phone. You could change passwords. You could quickly change the passcode to something else. You could gain access to Apple ID. Basically, you'd learn the passcode and you'd run off with the device, and you would have so much of that information available to do whatever you wanted to do with it. Very, very powerful if you have the passcode. So stolen device protection makes it so that Face ID or Touch ID biometric authentication is required when you're away from home or work or one of these significant locations for many different features. This includes being able to access stored passwords and passkeys. So again, if I'm not at home, if I'm not at work or another significant location, while I have stolen device protection turned on, the only way to access stored passwords and passkeys is if I use Face ID or Touch ID to authenticate, where before you could just type in a passcode. That's also stored credit cards. So Safari autofill, if you wanted to gain access to those credit cards and pay for something within Safari, you before could autofill those credit cards automatically if you had the passcode as that fallback. But now it requires Face ID or Touch ID. You cannot turn off lost mode, which is an important feature to turn on if your phone is stolen. You cannot go into settings and erase all contents and settings. You cannot apply for a new Apple Card. You cannot view the Apple Card virtual card number. That's a big one. So where normally you would be able to use a passcode to see what the Apple Card virtual card number was, you can't do it without Face ID or Touch ID biometric authentication. You can't make changes to Apple Cash and savings actions in the wallet. So for example, transferring money from Apple Cash or Apple Savings in the wallet app, not able to be done, again, without Face ID or Touch ID biometric authentication. And you can't use your iPhone to set up a new device. So you can't quick start to basically, if you had a phone sitting next to another phone, you're probably familiar with, if you've ever upgraded, that quick start process that lets you use one phone to gain access to and log into your iCloud very easily, very quickly. None of that is possible if you have this turned on without Face ID or Touch ID biometric authentication, unless you are in a familiar location. And importantly, in all of these cases, it does not allow passcode fallback. It will not let you use the passcode at all to do these things unless the device is in a familiar location. The other feature is a 1-hour security delay. And with the 1-hour security delay, this is the situation that I talked about, where if the phone was stolen and the person runs off with it, you have an hour to be able to report the device as lost or stolen. So you can go to appleid.apple.com or iCloud.com and report the device, put the device into lost mode. And Apple is giving you an hour to do that. But here is what's cool about this 1-hour security delay. And we'll talk about what requires this 1-hour security delay in a moment. But again, if the device is away from a familiar location, there is a 1-hour security delay in place for certain changes, certain settings, certain features. And what's required in order to do this is Face ID or Touch ID authentication in the moment you try to make the change, and then an hour delay, and then Face ID or Touch ID authentication afterward. So if I have stolen device protection turned on and I'm out and about and I do one of these features that I'm about to talk about, one of these settings changes that I'm about to reveal to you, it will require me to immediately Face ID or Touch ID authenticate. I still have to wait an hour. And then at the end, Face ID or Touch ID authenticate again. So you can imagine that even if a thief was able to get you in the moment to look at the phone to try to do this, there's still an hour delay before you're able to do it again. And importantly, if you return to a familiar location before that hour delay is up, it's possible, Apple says, that the delay will end. So it is possible that you could have this kind of slow down, or rather get cut off, and you would be able to finish it. So if you're out and about and you try to make one of these changes and you want it to finish and you don't want to have to wait a whole hour to do so, you can head home or head to work and have that finished. So these are the things that have the 1-hour security delay. If you try to change your Apple ID password while you are out and about and you have stolen device protection turned on, it's going to require Face ID or Touch ID authentication, an hour wait, and then authentication again in order to change that Apple ID password. If you want to sign out of your Apple ID on your device, also going to require this 1-hour security delay. If you want to update your Apple ID account security settings, so things like your recovery key or your recovery contact, that will also trigger this 1-hour security delay. If you want to, importantly, add or remove Face ID or Touch ID, basically, if the thief was trying to turn off this feature, this biometric authentication, not possible unless the biometric authentication takes place, an hour goes by, and the biometric authentication takes place again. Again, unless you're at one of these familiar locations. If you want to change the iPhone's passcode, once again, that's going to take an hour. This is huge because before you could change the iPhone passcode by having the iPhone passcode. If you want to reset all of the settings, again, will require that 1 hour security delay. If you want to turn off Find My, which is huge because that is a feature that has to be turned off in order to disable activation lock, which is something that makes these devices not as valuable to thieves. And if you want to turn off this feature itself, stolen device protection, then you will need to wait that 1 hour security delay. Of course, of utmost importance, that 1 hour delay gives you time to mark your device as stolen. It gives you time to access someone, a friend's device and go to Find My, log into your Apple ID, put the phone in lost mode and go from there. That's what that hour of time is for. Or as I mentioned before, if the thief was able to authenticate you immediately, they still would have to be with you for an hour and have you do it again in order to gain access. So it becomes less worth it, more risky because of this. So let's talk about how to actually achieve stolen device protection. How do we turn it on? So you can see I've got my iPhone here, and what we're going to want to do is go to the Settings app, and then we scroll down to Face ID and Passcode. It will ask you for your passcode, so I will type that in. And then I need to scroll down to Stolen Device Protection. Underneath, you will see a button that says Turn On Protection. I will tap on that button, and now it's turned on. Folks, that's it. Stolen Device Protection is turned on. And if I was at an unfamiliar location and I tapped that Turn Off Protection button, guess what would happen? An hour delay with Face ID or Touch ID authentication at the beginning, in this case, Face ID, and Face ID authentication at the end. That is your overview of stolen device protection. That walks you through when it's used, what features are changed because of stolen device protection, and everything you need to know about turning it on. Of course, turning it off works the same way. All of that is available to you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Hands on Mac. As always, I appreciate you for being a member of Club TWiT, twit.tv/clubtwit. Many of you have asked how you can help make sure we get to keep doing this. Hey, consider gifting a subscription of Hands on Mac to a friend or family member. And if you can't do that, just tell other people about Club TWiT. It's incredibly helpful. And we do appreciate everything that you folks do in helping to support us and continue to make this content that we love to make. So I will see you next week for another episode of Hands on Mac. Bye-bye.